everyone. I hope you had a great first week of classes. I know that I really enjoyed going through your discussion posts. I was popping in a little bit last week, and then I often spend a lot of time on Mondays to comb through, which leads me to a reminder. Make sure that you're going back into the discussion even after the week is over, especially after you see me post the weekly overview, because that means I've probably made a few comments. In this case, I made one that I will highlight towards the end of the wrap-up of last week's discussion. But I want to start off with a couple of observations and ways to synthesize what you were talking about and saying. The very first comment you see on screen is actually from Christy, and the challenge of trying to identify these components in a video. It's very different from looking at a static image, and you can even see from Christy's response on screen as well, since we have Christy and Christy. Some of you took it from the approach of trying to pause the screens and looking at individual static images. Some of you were trying to look at it as a whole, as the moving object. It really can be a challenge. But here's the kicker, because I know this question came out as well. There was a question about whether or not designers are actually setting out to incorporate these guides and principles and details when they film, when they create. And I can have a similar recollection of sitting in a junior high language arts class as we were learning about the introduction and the climax and the conclusion, the denouement. And I remember thinking at that time, do writers really sit down and outline out and figure out what's going to happen when and when they're going to do what? Well, here's the surprise. When you're creating multimedia, oftentimes, yes. However, some of it is still left to chance. So as you dug through the conversations, many of you noticed that you were less likely to come across the Gestalt laws in the videos, whereas we often can find examples of the Gestalt principles in print or static images. I shouldn't even say print, digital images as well, but static images versus multimedia video. However, I challenge you to go back and see how often somebody was able to identify Gestalt and see if you can find a similarity or a common thread in terms of the subject matter or context when you might be more likely to see examples of proximity and similarity. Just some food for thought there. But I also want to call your attention to the various kinds of videos you found. Some were professional productions, some were amateur. Some of the amateur productions you could tell had been created by a novice, or you could tell had been created by an expert, and how those dynamics play into creation. And most importantly, when specific guidelines were used or not used. I like to use these deconstruction type of activities and discussions because they force us to think through the applicability of what we're reading and hearing and seeing. Sometimes you'll find that it's easy to apply certain principles. Sometimes it's a little more challenging. As you grow as a designer, you'll find that it does become easier to determine when to use and when not to use, or how to use and how not to use. So that was kind of the purpose of last week's discussion and exercise. With that in mind, let's turn to our week 2 topic. Please use the links on screen to navigate to the section of the overview you wish to access.